Hello, team players. So I'm sure some of you guys have been waiting for this, but it's time for me to get back to teamwork builds. And today's build is all about using a whip and other flails to our advantage. Let's dive in. So the ancestry for today's build is going to be a hobgoblin. And for our heritage, we're going to be going with the Nephilim heritage. I did a video on that just recently. I'll put that up at the end of this video. And for today's class, we're going fighter. I know that seems kind of boring, but to be honest, fighter is the best class for this build. Before I go any further, I do want to thank my channel member Underhill for giving me the idea for this build. We actually came up with something similar in my member character creation stream I did a little while ago. So if you want to be a part of one of those streams, you can absolutely become a member of this channel. In the meantime, I should go over the starting stats for this build. However, remember that ability scores are no longer a thing thanks to the remaster. So I'm only going to give you the ability score modifiers. For this build, you'll need a strength of 4, a dexterity of 0, a constitution of 2, an intelligence of 1, a wisdom of 0, and a charisma of 2. Moving on to first level feats, we'll first want to take combat assessments. We're doing the more offensive version of this build, so there really isn't a great feat we can take here other than this, except maybe sudden charge. But since we're going to be using a whip, we're going to have quite a bit of reach, which means sudden charge may not be the best option for this build. But take what you want. For our first level ancestry feat, you have a couple of options here. You're going to want to take both these feats eventually, but the one you take at first level really doesn't matter. You're going to want to take one of the Nephilim lineage feats. You can either take it here at first level, or you can take Scion of Many Planes at 5th level and get it then. If you decide to take your lineage now, the best one to take for this build is Pitborn. And the feat you want to take for that is Titan Wrestler. So you can use athletic skill actions on bigger things, starting right away. Otherwise, you can pretty much take any lineage you want. There's a reason that we need a lineage, but we'll talk about that later in this video. But if you don't want to take your lineage here and would rather take it at 5th level with Scion of Many Planes, then your best option here is going to be to take Leech Clipper. So if we critically hit a foe with a weapon from the flail weapon group, like our whip, then we can cause them to take a minus 10 foot status penalty to their speed until either they or their allies disentangle the weapon, which takes 2 interact actions. Remember, if we critically hit with our whip, we also knock them prone, which effectively means if they don't want to take any penalties, they have to spend their entire turn getting rid of them. Okay, for level 2, we'll be taking Lunge. This effectively gives us an additional 5 foot reach with our whip. Thus, we can hit enemies from even further away. And of course, for our free archetype, we're going with the Martial Dedication. And if possible, we want to be expert in Intimidation here. We are going to be taking a feat that allows us to frighten foes more easily, but sometimes it is going to be better to try to demoralize opponents. So that's why we need to be expert in Intimidation. For general feats, we're going to be taking our standard Die Hard Toughness and Canny Acumen for our will saves, but we're also going to be taking Fleet and Incredible Initiative. The first 3 feats for our defenses, and the last 2 to help us be faster. Moving on to level 4, we will want to take Intimidating Strike for those situations where we've already demoralized an opponent and they're immune. And Dread Martial Stance will help us debuff opponents even more when we critically hit. For level 5, for Weapon Mastery, of course we're going to want to choose Flails. And for our Ancestry feat, remember how I said you had a choice between 2 different feats at first level? Well, this is where you take the one that you didn't pick at first level. So either Scion of Many Planes for a lineage, or Leech Clipper. Again, I'll talk about why we need a lineage later in this video. For teamwork report number 1, first, remember that our whip had the disarm and trip traits. Meaning we have a choice of lowering an opponent's offense or their defense. But more importantly, we can do both of those at reach. I mean, yes, our whip does do non-lethal damage. However, remember that non-lethal damage still counts toward an enemy being knocked unconscious. And once the enemy is unconscious, we can just coup de grace them after the fight. Unfortunately, we won't be able to combine all of our critical hit effects until level 5 when we get critical specialization effects for our flails. What would essentially happen is, if we critically hit them while we're in Dread Marshal stance, we would knock them prone, lower their speed by 10 feet, and frighten them. And again, we can do all this from reach. And we can use combat assessments in order to make a recall knowledge to see if it's better to use our intimidating strike or try to demoralize the foe. But overall, we just want as many of those critical hits as possible, which is why we went fighter and not something like barbarian. Also remember, we get all those effects whenever we critically hit, regardless of what feats we use on that strike. Granted, we have to use some type of weapon from the flail group, but we're going to be using our whip most of the time anyway, because that's going to be our best weapon, because of that nice little reach, especially with lunge. Alright, like usual, I'm going to go through the rest of these feats really quickly. First, disarming stance will help us with our disarm checks, because again, disarm has been buffed. And rallying charge will give our allies temporary HP whenever we hit a foe. Shatter defenses will either help us keep enemies frightened or make them flat-footed when our trip attempts aren't working. To battle will give our allies extra actions, and antagonizing rebuke is another reason why we need to have high intimidation. This makes frightened enemies take mental damage every round they continue to engage in combat with us, which thanks to Leech Clipper might as well be a guarantee if we critically hit them. Disarming Twist will let us make a melee strike and disarm a foe, but more importantly, if we're in disarming stance, we get a +1 to hit on this strike. And Topple Foe will let us trip foes as a reaction instead of having to do it on our turn. Then we'll take our second stance, Lunging Stance. So when we're in this stance, we can use our reactive strike with a 5-foot reach. Meaning we can hit a foe up to 15 feet away using our reactive strike if we're using our whip. And of course, we've got to take Cadence Call to quicken allies. Summon Nephilim Kin is the reason that we need a lineage. This will essentially allow us to summon a creature appropriate to our lineage, thus giving our allies or ourselves flanking, which is simply another way we can get the off-guard condition for us or our allies. It's going to take a while to get used to off-guard instead of flat-footed, so sorry if I keep saying flat-footed. Moving on, we have Opening Stance, allowing us to go straight into one of our 2 stances at the beginning of our turn. And of course, Tactical Cadence will get rid of the downsides of Cadence Call. Of course, since we have 2 stances, we're going to need to take Master of Many Styles, so we can easily switch between them. And Snap Out of it will help our allies against mental effects. Our last ancestry feat for this build is going to be Cantorian Restoration. This effectively allows us to cast Breath of Life once per day. Not only is this a reaction, but it also heals more hit points. For level 18, we're going to take Tactical Reflexes. This gives us an extra reaction every round to use only for a reactive strike. Meaning we can use our other reaction for one of the many other reactions in this build. And we're pretty much done with the Martial dedication, so we're going to be taking the Bounty Hunter dedication here. This gives us the Hunt Prey action, but that's not really important for this build. What's important is the next free archetype feat we're going to take. Okay, we finally got to level 20, and we're going to take Boundless Reprisals. At the start of each of our enemy's turns, we gain an extra reaction that we can use for any fighter, feat, or feature. So we basically get an attack of opportunity every enemy's turn now. At this point, you can probably retrain tactical reflexes into something else, because you won't need it now. And our last feat for this build is going to be Opportunistic Grapple. This is so we can grapple foes that have high reflex DCs. And we can do it on their turn, but only if they critically fail an attack roll against us. Which is why more than likely you will want to wear heavy armor in this build. Okay, so for teamwork report number 2, I know it seems like this build has a ton of reactions, and it kind of does, but honestly, other than reactive strike, you're really only going to need one of those reactions per turn. Granted, it would be nice to be able to use all those reactions per turn with groundless reprisals, but since most of those reactions are on the free archetype side, that's not going to work. But since we are getting so many reactive strikes, especially at high levels, we're going to get lots of critical hits. And remember, every time we critically hit, we are basically forcing the enemy to waste their entire turn by either attacking us or getting out of their predicament. And even if they do decide to attack us, they're only getting 2 actions to do so every time we crit. And of course, getting back up also provokes a reactive strike, which means if we crit on that, they're right back in their same situation. Which is another reason why tactical reflexes and boundless reprisals are so important in this build. And you can do most of what this build is capable of with a regular flail as well. You just wouldn't get that awesome reach. But the overall goal here is to do as much non-lethal damage as possible and make them waste actions. But if you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 2e teamwork content. I want to thank Underhill again for giving me the idea for this build. If you want a Google Sheet for this and a bunch of other builds, you can check out the link in the description below for my Patreon page. My links to my Discord and my social media are down there as well. But if you want to use more feats from the Nephilim Versatile Heritage, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.